Hey everyone, welcome back to Kali Plants. Me again, Mark. Today we're back at the house. We're in front of our house because it's getting windy outside. Actually, I shot a video last week, and when I finished recording that, I realized that my camera wasn't recording properly. So the video wasn't usable. I repotted this sedum right here, this sedum burrito in that video, but the video was unusable afterwards. So I had to scrap that. We're gonna make this video right now, which is about the largest succulents that we have, and I have some of the largest succulents currently in my collection. I discussed that in our earlier video that I said that we have scrapped, so we're gonna be talking about that today. I will be giving you, I think, about 5 or 6 tips on how to get larger succulents. Okay, if you buy small size succulents and if you're wondering how you can make them grow large, how you can make them bigger, for those types that have smaller rosettes, how will you make them more lush and produce more growth? So I will be talking about that in this video. So the first tip that I will be sharing with you is the potting mix. I recommend you add more organic materials into the potting mix that you're using. I have some of the plants that I have here which have grown really large, which has produced a lot of growth because I changed their potting mix. This string of tears used to be in a very pumice heavy potting mix and it wasn't doing anything. So now I added more organic materials into it, and hopefully I can move that closer to the camera and you can see it. Okay, now it has really grown a lot. Okay, so you can see that it has even this trailing stems, which it didn't have before. So I really like the growth on this one, and that's because I added more organic materials. It's actually much more heavier because of the organic materials. So that's what you can do. Same goes with this one. I added more organic materials with my Macdugalii. If you've been following the channel, I bought this like a few months back and I planted it in a shallow dish pot, and it didn't do anything in that because I think I added too much pumice. So I changed the potting mix and I placed it in this large container, and with more organic materials in its potting mix, it has produced a lot of this new growth. Okay, so you can see that, and the stem of it just dropped right now. Okay, I will be replanting that later, but you can see all the lush growth on this plant. Really nice. I really love how it had grown so much. Every time it gets thirsty, it shrinks a little bit. The leaves become much more thinner. They become much more delicate. But after I water them, the leaves like plump back up and the rosettes get much wider. So that's what happens with this plant, and it has already produced a lot of these trailing stems that I think I will be cutting off once it gets much more wider. Once the rosettes on these stems get much wider, we can propagate that later on. So this is a really nice clumping Graptopetalum. I would recommend it highly if you want if you want a plant that is easier to grow. I would recommend this Graptopetalum Macdugalii. Okay, so now we're gonna move on to our next tip. Okay, so in case you're wondering, all of the plants here that I have already has more organic materials into their potting mix, so which is why they have grown so much. So if you're wondering, all of the succulents that I have here currently actually have more organic materials into their potting mix compared to when I first started growing succulents about 2 years ago. I think I added too much pumice, so a lot of my succulents back then didn't survive. But if I add a lot more organic materials, the succulents survive for longer and they grow much more larger. Okay, for the next tip that I will be sharing with you is to fertilize your succulents. Now, this is especially true if you cannot replace the potting mix of your succulents, or if you use the potting mix that doesn't have a lot of organic materials to them. You can use Osmocote. You can fertilize your succulents, sprinkle the Osmocote on top of their potting mix, and then once you water, the fertilizer will be absorbed into the plant. That, I think, is what helped the sedum burrito grow large. We will be grabbing this one right now. I recently repotted it, so it has more organic materials into its potting mix right now. But previously, I had this in a very carbonized rice hull heavy potting mix. Okay, I think it wasn't the alnus compost that I have been using, so I used carbonized rice hull and it didn't do well, so I added pumice into it and it has produced a lot of growth from then on. Okay, so you can see here all the new stems that it has at the top of the plant. Okay, so those are new shoots, and we've got these trailing stems. One of the stems here have died because it had bloomed, so it's now branching. So I replaced the potting mix. I already added a lot more organic materials into the potting mix, and I think I will add fertilizer later on. So that's what you can do if you cannot change the potting mix on your plants. If you want them to grow and if they're stunted, you can add Osmocote. And this is especially true. This is especially true if you have potting mix that is already very old and it doesn't have any nutrients anymore. Probably it had nutrients before, but because you water consistently, it ran out of those nutrients. You can add Osmocote so that you can get much more growth on your plants. Now, I would recommend using Osmocote on plants that are growing currently in the weather that you have. If you're in the middle of winter, which is, I don't think anyone's in winter, or probably in Australia, they're currently in winter right now, you wouldn't want to fertilize your succulents because they will not be growing that much. They wouldn't be able to use the nutrients. It can burn the roots, or it can cause overgrowing on them. You can see them etiolate because you added too much fertilizer. For some colorful succulents, you will also lose a little bit of color with more fertilizer because some succulents stress when they don't have any nutrients. So that way they will get more colors. So fertilizing them will make them much more greener, but fertilizing them will actually help them grow much more faster. So you have to choose if you want your succulents to grow faster or if you want them to retain their colors. Now, when it comes to color, I would recommend you just do it like on the summer or in the winter. When they are not growing too much, they can get much more color. And when they are not growing too much, you can also avoid using fertilizer at that time, and then use fertilizer on them when they are growing, and then let them get their green colors. And once the season is over, once the growing season is over, you can hold back the fertilizer and you will get more colors on them. So that's what I would recommend. Now, on the third tip, this is kind of a controversial tip that I will be sharing, but that is the drop in temperature. Okay, I've noticed this with my succulents recently. When I place them at the bottom of the greenhouse, they grow a lot more. They produce more leaves, and even the ones that have shriveled for a long time, they started plumping back up once they are at the bottom of the greenhouse. So if you can, try to put your succulents in a much more colder area, but it's still a very bright area, but it's much more cooler, not that heat, not that hot. Okay, if you can put them there, you can expect to see a lot more growth on them. They will etiolate a little bit if they are put in the dark. So I would not recommend that you place them in a very dark area, but in a place that they will get like morning sun, and then not too much heat during the afternoon. So if you protect them from afternoon sun, but they still get plenty of filtered light or light around them, then you can expect them to grow a little more. And also, I would say that you will get much more benefit on this if you have colder temperatures at night. Succulents usually develop a lot during the nighttime. That is their active growing time during at night. So if you can manage to put them in a cool place at night and then put them in a bright place in the morning, then that will help them grow a lot more. Though this is a little bit like much more, I'm still skeptical on this one, but I've noticed some growth on my succulents with this strategy. So what you can do, if you water your succulents, put them in a colder location in your greenhouse, which they will still get filtered light, probably near to the ground, and then you will see much more growth on them. Once they are drying up, or once you already have finished watering them, you can bring them back up to the light so that they won't etiolate too much. Now, I've done this strategy that I'm telling you, putting my succulents down at the bottom part of the greenhouse. I've done it with this plant, okay? I think it helped a little bit with the growth of this one. And also, I've done it with this plant, okay? This plant, this is a new Shabayana echeveria, and I planted this with a lot of organic materials. It actually has some fertilizer inside of it, okay? And when I water this, I put this at the bottom of the greenhouse. I wait for it to dry out a little bit before I bring it back to the sun. And that will also help avoid rotting, because if it's in the middle of the summer and they're too hot and you watered them, so they might be much more prone to rot. So I would recommend you put them in a cooler area until they dry up a little bit for about 2 days, and then bring them back up to the full sun location that they were in before. And you can expect your succulents to grow, to establish, to absorb their water, to become much more fatter. And when you bring them to the sun, you will get much more color on them, and they will not etiolate that much. So I hope that you're getting the tip that I shared with that. The fourth tip that I will be sharing is to gradually move your succulents from small containers to larger containers as they grow. And I've done that with a lot of the succulents that I have here. With this one in particular, I planted this in a small pot before, and when I planted it there, it started growing, and once it grew a lot, I planted this into a large container. So you can see there, It's already in a large container. That will help your succulents reach their larger growth, their maximum potential. I also did the same with this plant. Okay, it's already in a large container. I don't usually use this large container with my echeverias because they will rot if you put a very small plant in a large container. So you will have to wait for them to root up in a small container first and then move them to a larger container, especially if they already have a large rosette at the top. If they already have a big growth, then you can move them to a larger container. Just make sure that they have roots. Same goes with this super bomb. Okay, I really like how this one had grown. Okay, and what I did here, because this was two plants that are small, I planted them together. So that's what you can do if you want your succulents to be in a large container. And if they're still small in size, you can plant multiple plants into a single container in a large one. So with those multiple plants, sharing the potting mix, in that potting mix, they will have more roots to absorb the water, so they will not become waterlogged for too long. But if you like put a single plant in a very large container and then you water, it will take too long for the plant to absorb the water, so it might get rot. So if you have small plants and you want them to establish in a large container, just plant multiple plants in a single container. That's what you can do if you have the same plant. Okay, I would recommend that. With the Graptopetalums in particular, they grow a lot of fruits very quickly. And yeah, if you have the same plant, you can plant them together. But you can also plant together different types of plants. But once they reach their largest size, you will have to separate them. Once they have roots, you will have to separate them in different containers later on, because once they reach their maximum size, they will not be growing anymore. Once they have reached the potting mix, the entire potting mix with the roots, they will be stunted in their growth already. So you wouldn't want to plant too many plants in a single container because that will halt their growth. But if you want them to grow big, you can plant one or two plants in a large container, just so they have roots to absorb the water. Now on to the fifth tip on how to make your succulents much more larger is to place them in a rain or shine location. Succulents are still plants. They benefit very well if they get the maximum amount of sun and the maximum amount of rain that you can provide them. And because of the rain, they will also experience that lower drop in temperature, but with much more brighter, in a much more brighter area, because they're in a rain or shine location, so they can get cold temperatures and the maximum amount of sunlight when it rains. So that will actually push them to grow a lot more if you place them in a rain or shine location. And that is what happened with this one, with this Darly Sunshine. I think this used to be just one head, and look at how many heads that this one has produced. And also this is growing in a pretty shaded area, but it has already produced a lot of growth. So yeah, I'm actually wondering how it managed to do that. We also have this Cryptopetalum mendozae that is growing outside in my rain or shine location. Let me just grab it. Though there are some negatives to the rain or shine treatment, I will share that with you later on. But you can see how much growth this has produced already. Okay, it has already overtaken a spot. We also have another Myrinae right here that has been growing in a rain or shine location. They just explode in size once you put them out. Okay, that's what happens with Graptopetalums. I would really say that Graptopetalums in particular really grow a lot. Okay, and they can also tolerate a little bit of rain or shine in your area. Okay, I would just recommend this if you don't get like rains for a very, very, very long time. But yeah, these plants, they have been out for a while now and they're still doing well. Now it's just dropping leaves all over. Now I have another one here, this Paraguayense that I have had for a while, and I managed to propagate this several times. You can see how much growth this plant has already produced. Okay, you can see there how large this plant is. It's grown really, really large. It has multiplied its heads considerably, and I'm intending to repot this soon. I will probably get a larger pot for this plant because it has already grown so much. It's getting into a bushier state, and I wanted to repot this one in a very large container, in a large pot, so that we can see more growth on it. I'm just looking for a much more sturdier pot because it looks like it's gonna break its pot. if you don't put it in a very tough pot. It's really heavy, really heavy. I can just sense the amount of roots that are inside of this pot. Okay, what happens with the rain or shine treatment when you do it? They also produce a lot of roots. Actually, I've repotted a lot of my rain or shine plants, and once I repot them, they usually have a lot of roots into their pots. So that is actually helpful if you're growing into this summer season where you get some occasional rain. You don't have to water your rain or shine succulents anymore. You just let the occasional rain water them. And if you get weeks without sunlight, you wouldn't want to water them still, because once it rains, they will just explode in growth. Okay. I will also say that with the Graptopetalum superbum that I have here, I've had this in a rain or shine location. It had grown considerably, but it was dropping its leaves, so I placed it back inside the greenhouse. So that's what also will happen. It's probably an issue with the potting mix. So sometimes rain or shine succulents will desiccate. Even if they get rained on, they will drop a lot of their leaves. So that usually happens if they don't get a lot of sun. If they get waterlogged as well, they might drop a lot of leaves. And also if their potting mix is not right, they will drop their leaves. So I would recommend that if your plant is dropping its leaf, I would recommend you put it in a shadier area. Don't put it in a rain or shine anymore. Wait for the potting mix to dry out and then repot your succulent into a much better potting mix. Now, I would just recommend, if you're intending to grow your succulents outside in a rain or shine location, don't add too much organic materials compared to the succulents you're growing inside a sheltered location. Okay, so these plants that I'm growing in a greenhouse, they have some organic materials. They have more organic materials than pumice. But these plants that I have been growing outside, they have a little bit of more pumice than organic materials. Still, I would recommend you add organic materials to them, but add just a little bit more pumice so that they will dry out faster. Once the rain is over, they will not be waterlogged for too long. So you will have to make your own experiments about that, adjustments on your plants. Okay, you will just have to consistently watch over your plants if they're in a rain or shine location, so that you can see that they are really growing. If they are not growing, if they are desiccating, repot them, put them back inside. Don't put them in a rain or shine location yet. And once you know that they have already established, you can bring them back outside to the rain or shine location. So that's what I would recommend. So that's it for this video, guys. I hope that you really like the tips that I shared with you. We managed to round it out to 5 different tips on how to grow larger succulents. Now you will have to choose which methods you want to try with your succulents. Sometimes some method will work on one and other methods will work on others. And sometimes a method can be combined, okay? But sometimes some method will not work together. For example, if you're growing in a rain or shine location, you wouldn't want to add too much organic materials into their potting mix. And you wouldn't also want to add too much fertilizer into their potting mix if you put them in a rain or shine location, because if you add fertilizer to them, they will etiolate very easily. Okay, so yeah, I think that's about it for all the tips that I will be sharing in this video. If you really like those tips, please make sure to hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so that you can see more care tips on our succulents, and also share this video with your friends if you have friends which are struggling with succulents. And I think that's about it for this video, guys. I will see you on the next one. Bye bye.